This Pacers team, every time they get on a high, it comes right back down. They go to Brooklyn. They're leading late. They lose to the Nets. Their defense was terrible throughout the middle of the game. They're not in sixth place anymore. What happened? What's going on in the clutch? And it's standings watch at a terrible time for the Pacers on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Thursday, and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, it happened again. The Pacers have a chance at a 3-game win streak, a chance to get some momentum. They're playing a crummy team. We know they can beat this crummy team because they just beat them 2 days ago. And they lose, and they fall flat on their face. They were up 12 in the first quarter. They were up 3 with seconds to go, and they still lose to the Brooklyn Nets. What went wrong? Why couldn't they get this one done? Where does this put them in the standings? Why is their clutch play so bad? And, of course, our usual weekly standings watch check-in on this lovely Wednesday. It's all coming today on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Look, here's the thing about this game. I've said all season about this Pacers team, about every team in the league, that these series kind of setups, right, where there's 2 games, it's really hard. I'm about to be mean to the Pacers. Let me get through all this. It's really hard to win both, right? The Pacers went into Miami earlier this season. No Haliburton. They won the second game there. They beat Philly in Philly during the in-season tournament. They beat Boston at home in that kind of setup, right? Like that, it's generally just hard for an NBA team to do that twice in a row. And so that alone made me think, maybe, New Orleans, they split with New Orleans. Anyway, it's just hard. And so I thought, well, that's a factor here. But the urgency for the Pacers is as high as possible, right? It's not a must-win game. They still control their own destiny for 6, but this was as close as you can get with half a dozen games to go. They have clobbered the Nets twice this season. They won by multiple tens of points both times they played this team. Nets have nothing to play for, and Haliburton drowning in a form, and Siakam's playing well. Despite all the factors of the splitting the series, I thought, Pacers are going to roll this game. They're going to get their 3-game winning streak. They're going to be feeling good. Their Heat game Sunday is going to be epic. Now you just never know. You just never know with the Pacers, who are 8-5 in their last 13 games, and all 5 of their losses feel like sky is falling kind of losses. Give up 150, look woeful against the Bulls, can't beat the Nets, destruction at the buzzer against the Bulls, destruction by Anthony Edwards. That's their last 5 losses. I mean, it's just been crazy what's been happening to this team in the last month. But they lose to the Nets. There's so much to talk about from this game. The big picture reason they lost this game, right, is their defense was just god-awful in the second quarter and parts of the third quarter. They picked it up in the middle of the third, and they were able to chip their way back into the game after falling down as much as 13. They were up 14 in the first quarter. They were up 13 in the middle of the second quarter, and they were down 13 in the middle of the third. That's how bad their defense was for that stretch. And it was woeful. It was really interesting because after the last Pacers-Nets game on Monday, they crushed them. They won by 22, and I thought we'd get to hear from a team in post-game press conferences that had a happy we just won by 22 tone. And Rick Carlisle did not take that tone. He said, our defense stunk in the second half. We couldn't get the stops we needed. We were too reliant on Myles in the first half. We've got to be better defensively, right? And I thought that was interesting, but maybe a good message to send. Myles, remember, that first half had 5 blocks. Pacers were up 29 in the first half on Monday. Things were looking good. Well, they didn't have Myles tonight. That was a big thing. No Myles Turner. He had the fingers wrapped together on the bench. They started Jalen Smith. He did not play very well. Isaiah Jackson came off the bench, one of his less complete games of the season. That's a big loss. And so the problem isn't that they didn't have Turner, although that did hurt them. The problem is that they didn't have their backstop in general because they were giving up so many just straight line drive, easy baskets to the Nets, especially in the second quarter when this game completely flipped. Pacers were up 12 after the first quarter, and then the second quarter was just dominated by the Brooklyn Nets. It was not even close. It felt like the Pacers were going to get blown out in the second half. That's how bad the second quarter felt in this game. To put some numbers on it, 42 points for Brooklyn, 14 of them for Noah Clowney, who made 3 threes. Noah Clowney had 14 points in one quarter. That was his career high entering the day. He had 4 made threes this season. He made 3 that quarter. In some ways, you can call that fluky, like he's kind of being left open on purpose. Credit to him, he made them. In some ways, the fact that he was wide open as much as he was, you'd wonder a little bit about what's going on there. 9 points for Cam Thomas, who was getting wherever he wanted. Dennis Schroeder was getting to the basket. Nick Claxton was cleaning up on the glass. Like, they just crushed the Pacers in that quarter. And the Pacers themselves, right, what they've done so well against the Nets this season is get those stops, push it to the rim themselves, and run in transition. Well, they can't get the stops. They can't run in transition, right? So their offense just looked completely ineffective in that quarter as well. And part of that's because they were taking the ball out of the rim. But the cycle just kept going and going and going. And they lost the lead. They got it back before halftime. Like, they still lost the second half of the game. We'll talk about the clutch stuff in a second. But the defense in that quarter was so bad. They could not keep anybody in front of them. And that's really where the game got away from them in a way that was so significant. Like, Dennis Schroeder should not be that effective. He had 5 assists in one quarter. Dennis Schroeder did. Credit to the Nets. They were doing well to take advantage of these things. But that was where this game really turned for the Pacers. And the other part of this is, and this will be the focus of our second segment among many things from this game, was the clutch play. Fourth quarter of this game was fascinating. This was almost a totally different podcast that you're listening to right now. The Pacers were down in the fourth quarter as much as 6 at times. In the middle of the quarter, they were down 6. They called a timeout so they could sub, right? They wanted to get Haliburton in. They wanted to get Siakam in. And in the fourth quarter, Haliburton had 6 points and 2 assists. And Siakam had 15 points in the fourth quarter. He went crazy. Siakam, I said that weird, was not playing his best game at all. I think he started this game 4 for 16, 4 for 15 from the field, and he just started lighting it up in the fourth. The Pacers were not getting him the ball enough when he had smaller guys on him. They finally figured that out in the fourth. And something they did that I put in my notes, with exactly 5 minutes to go, they just went straight to a Siakam Haliburton pick and roll, with Haliburton having the ball, immediate and one for Siakam. They went to it a couple possessions later. He scored again. I thought, oh, they've got something going here. Siakam cooked in the fourth quarter, 7 for 11 in one frame for 15 points. He got them back into the game. He got them the lead. He was unstoppable. He was smiling. He was going crazy. And the Pacers got the lead in the final 90 seconds. They were up by 3 points, right? This felt like a game they had at that point to me, because Haliburton was playing well. Siakam was having a wonderful game, up 3 late, right? And then they got to stop. 1:26 to go. Mikal Bridges misses a floater and gets the rebound and gets an open 3 and drills it with 1:23 to go. And the Pacers do not score again until there's 9 seconds to go. The Pacers hit 108 with 1:41 to go. They did not score until 9 seconds left. In that stretch, the Nets scored 10 points. Until the Pacers scored, they scored 8, right? That put the game away. The Pacers could not stop them in the final 90 seconds, right? Bridges 3, Dennis Schroeder driving finger roll. Noah Clowney gets fouled. That was a bad foul by Obi Toppin. On that one, Mikal Bridges free throw on an intentional foul. Jalen Wilson, 2 free throws on an intentional foul. They scored every possession. Some of those the Pacers wanted them to stop the clock, but it was just an absolutely brutal ending on what should have been a night where Siakam leads them over the line. Their clutch play becomes a story again. That will be our entire second segment, or most of our second segment, is the clutch play. So this Pacers game just sums up their season so much. They're playing an inferior team. They jump all over them to start the game, right? They're up 31-19. They're up 14 points the first quarter, and it just slowly slips away from them. They needed to win this game. They needed to have a grown-up moment where they win 3 in a row, where they play their style for a full game, where they show this defensive level that they've reached for much of March, where they beat an inferior team when they're supposed to. And they couldn't do it. They couldn't close them out. They couldn't beat the crummy team. They couldn't sustain their first quarter level on either end of the floor. And even when they got over all of that and somehow found a way to take the lead with 90 seconds to go, they still could not win the game. They're in 7th place. We'll talk standings at the end. Don't panic yet, is what I would say about the standings. You should be, if you're a fan of the Pacers, you should be upset about this loss, but don't panic just yet. We'll explain why, and we'll talk matchups. That's the theme of today. But this was not a good loss for the Pacers. This was not a good performance for them. They needed to be better. This was maybe one of their easiest opponents left of the season. They play the Raptors, who have lost 1 million in a row. But every other team they play, even if they're not awesome in quality right now, the Thunder are banged up. Cavs are a little banged up. They're all playing for something, seeding, whatever. So this was an important one for the Pacers. The last team they were playing that had very little to play for, they couldn't do it for so many reasons. Their defense fell apart. They were missing Myles Turner, and the clutch play was not there. Let's talk about that clutch play because the numbers are jarring, especially since the All-Star break. It's a big problem for the Pacers, and it's been a theme for them so often this season. It's why all their losses feel so demoralizing. We'll talk about that in the second segment before Standings Watch. But first, we have to talk about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million, that's a lot, parts for your number one ride or die, you will always find exactly what you are looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time. You'll get your money back because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it is easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay guaranteed fit only available to U.S. customers. And we are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day for your second listen. Locked On Nets. You're about to win for the Brooklyn Nets, and Cam Thomas was awesome. And the Nets could have kept their playing hopes alive, except the Hawks won. So the Nets are out. And a lot of the seeding, the top 10 in the East are set. The teams that will be playing beyond the regular season is set in the East. The Pacers among them, where specifically, we'll talk about that later. Let's talk about clutch time basketball. Look, I just alluded to it. I didn't even allude to it. I just straight up said it in the first segment. Tonight, specifically, their offense was really bad in the clutch, right? Didn't score at all for until Haliburton 3 with 9 seconds to go. They did not score at all, hardly, in clutch time. Let's run through the possessions because they were rolling leading up to it. Now, the Nets changed their defensive strategy. To their credit, they defended well late in the game. But here from 4:09 to 1:41 on the clock, here are the Pacers' possessions. Siakam 10-foot step back, Siakam 9-foot fadeaway, Siakam 10-foot step back, Siakam 18-foot turnaround jumper, Siakam 14-foot turnaround fadeaway. He was rolling. So it makes sense that after Mikal Bridges goes for the 3 to tie it with a minute 23 to go, they go to Siakam. But he commits a charge, right? So that they went to him. I saw people criticizing the team on Twitter. Go to Siakam. They tried. They did, right? Dennis Schroeder scores the next possession. So offense, sputters, defense, sputters. Next possession, Obi Toppin comes in. He was having a nice game. Siakam gets another decent look. Doesn't make it from 9 feet this time. Noah Clowney gets a rebound. Pacers down to 41 seconds to go. Mental error. They're fighting for the rebound under the basket with Noah Clowney. Obi Toppin fouls him. 2 free points for the Nets. The shot clock was on. That was not a good foul. That was a mistake by the Pacers. No problem. They get the ball. They still could have 2 possessions, only down 4. Bad pass by Obi Toppin. The Pacers turn it over. Nets get the ball. It's a free throw game at that point with the amount of time left. And they still kind of gave themselves a chance because of the Haliburton 3. They were down too late, but Wilson made both free throws, which put it away. So what happened? A turnover, another turnover via a charge to the right player, a missed shot from the right player. They went to Siakam. He just missed the shots late after rolling leading up to that stretch. So their offensive execution stunk. The turnover by Toppin looms large. But in general, they kind of went to what I would have thought they went to. The thing that was working, the player that was cooking, actions that made sense. What really clowned them, though, and as we dive into their clutch play recently as we go through this, was their defense. They did not stop the Nets once in the final minutes, right? After Siakam makes it 108-105, here are all their possessions. I've already read them. I'll do it again. Bridges 3, make. They got to stop. That was it. The minute 26 not getting that rebound on Bridges was killer. It was a really weird play, but still, it killed them. Schroeder layup, Clowney free throws, Bridges free throw. Okay, after the Clowney free throws, that was the bad foul. Everything after that, they scored, but it was intentional. But still, Bridges free throws, Wilson free throws. They scored every possession after Siakam made it 108-105. Brutal way to lose the game. Their clutch play doomed them again. So I actually went to look when it became 108-105 at the Pacers clutch level since the All-Star break. So to set a scene for you to get you really into what all these numbers actually are. For the whole season, well, my computer has decided to fail this research project. Okay, over the course of the full season, the Pacers have currently played in 35 clutch games, right? They are 17 and 18 in those games with a plus 4.6 net rating. That's fine. That's the 11th best net rating in the clutch. They have not met that with their wins and losses, but that's fine, right? They've been okay on the whole in clutch games. And remember, clutch time's a small sample, so these things can fluctuate. But their early season clutch play with Haliburton playing so awesome was awesome, right? Duh. After the All-Star break, when he hasn't been as good and the team's been a little more wobbly, oof is all I can say. Oof. The Pacers, after the All-Star break, have played in 8 clutch games. They have won 1 of them. They are 1-7 in clutch games since the All-Star break. They beat the Pelicans at home. That was the only one. For reference, the other teams that have played exactly 8 clutch games, the Magic are 5-3, the Knicks are 4-4, and the Nets are 4-4. Everyone else has played a different number of games. So, in theory, this isn't actually like reality, but this is pretty close. In theory, if you're in a clutch game within 5 points in the final 5 minutes, that game has been close to even for 43 minutes. It's close to 50-50. It's not always that, but it's close. Like, in theory, you should be close to 500 in these settings, but they're not. They're 1-7. That's the worst. They have the fewest wins in the clutch since the All-Star break. That is last. Here are the teams with 2. The Jazz tanking, the Hornets tanking, and the Celtics, who 1 stink in crunch time play, and 2 are never in crunch time because they win by so much. They have the fewest crunch time games since the break, right? Like, it's just been terrible for the Pacers. So the numbers are exactly what you'd expect, right? Offensive rating for the Pacers in crunch time since the break, 120.7. That's 7th in the league. That's awesome. They score, right? That's great. Their defensive rating in crunch time since the break is 138.8. That is second to last. Only the Pelicans, who are the Pacers' only win in crunch time since the break, are worse. So the Pacers' net rating in clutch games since the break is minus 18.1. That's 25th. Here's the thing. 1 or 2 bad games, because these sample sizes are so small, can still kind of deflate those. Here's why I mean by that. The Timberwolves have played in 12 clutch games since the All-Star break. Their net rating is minus 28.8. Their offense is dreadful in the clutch. They're 6-6, right? Sometimes the ball just bounces their way. The Nets are 4-4 despite a minus 21.1 net rating in clutch time since the break. These are small samples, so a lot can change the net ratings versus wins. But the Pacers have just been so bad on defense that they can't even get the lucky bounces to go their way. And they keep losing these clutch games. And those games feel so much more demoralizing to a team and a fan base to me, right? Like in the moment, especially. Like looking back since the break, you can go through all these. They're all just painful, right? Lakers on the road. They came back in a big way. They scored 145 points. Couldn't do it. Broke up a very successful road trip otherwise. Chicago at home, up 3 with 3 seconds to go on your home floor. And they played the math game and lost, right? Minnesota tied it up late. Anthony Edwards has to play his best clutch game ever and have what he called his highest jump ever. And he goes crazy making shots for the Pacers to lose that game, right? Toronto should have won that game. That one was brutal. At home after the break, they couldn't get any stops late there. Like, they just cannot get these wins. And, of course, this Brooklyn game tonight. So many demoralizing ones. But you can even count Brooklyn tonight, Chicago at home, and Minnesota. That's 3, like, more than a toss-up Pacers had a good chance to win level of games. And that's just since the All-Star break, right? Even the Toronto home game, that just rip your heart out if you're the Pacers. But they cannot get these wins. They keep falling behind in the standings, and they lost again in this one. If they're going to win clutch games, they've got to be better on defense, but they needed it on both ends in this one, which really, again, masked what could have been a pretty nice night for the Pacers. Siakam was amazing in the fourth quarter until the end with the turnovers. He was incredible. Haliburton was making deep threes. He took 14, but he made 5. Pacers as a team didn't shoot very well, but Haliburton looked okay. Obi Toppin in his hometown had a really nice game. Right? Nesmith played really nice defense and was making his 2-pointers and driving well in this game, I thought, at least. They had some rough nights from some centers, but in general, Pacers had some good performers. Their stars were good enough and had 50 points, 11 assists, and 12 rebounds combined. They did enough to win on the aggregate, but some crummy defense in the second quarter, untimely third quarter plays, Not good enough clutch play. 43-34. 7th place in the East. Only a 1-loss lead over the now returned Joel Embiid Philadelphia 76ers. Tough game for the Pacers to lose. And yet, no one wants to hear good news right now. They still control their destiny for 6th in the East. They still, with 5 games to go, control their own destiny to make the playoffs. Not the play-in, the playoffs. I'll explain how. I'll talk matchups. We'll do standings watch again, as we do, to close out today's show. But first, let's talk about Amazon and their Fire TV, your destination for sports. From live games to highlights to in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers an amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV Stick, of which I own one, and they're awesome, that you can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or the college basketball tournament, you are going to want to have a Fire TV. Fire TV recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes us here at Locked On, as well as most of the big pro leagues and college conferences. Fire TV channels lets you dive into all of the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep you up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, March Madness, NBA, MLB, and lots more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, traveling, and cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. And we are back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. The Magic won in the game the Pacers cared a great deal about Wednesday night. Check out Locked On Magic. Hear about the team that I thought maybe we'd be talking about today. Maybe the Pacers can catch them. But now I'm thinking maybe they can get the 2 seed because they play the Bucks twice down the stretch of the season. Whoo-hee! Are the standings crazy in the East? If you want any sort of silver lining to this Pacers loss, nobody does. No one in the East is doing awesome right now. The Heat are 7-3. Actually, the Heat are probably doing the best of anybody. The Heat are 7-3 in their last 10 games. From seeds 2 to 9 in the East, that is the best record. 6-4 is the second best from the Pacers, and a lot of 5-5 and 4-6 teams. So what's happened since last week here on Standings Watch? Well, the Bulls lost enough and the Hawks lost enough that they are locked into 9-10. The Pacers have clinched top 8. We never have to talk about Chicago and Atlanta ever again in Standings Watch. Celtics have clinched the top record in the East. We're only talking about 2 through 8 now in the East. Pacers are 3.5 back of 2. It's actually possible. It's extremely unlikely, but it's possible. And they're 1.5 ahead of 8th seeded Philadelphia, who just got Joel Embiid back and beat the Thunder at home. Things are scary and precarious for the Pacers. So here's where I'll start. If you're here for good news, here it is. The Pacers, right this second, Thursday morning, still control their own destiny for the 6th seed because they play the Heat on Sunday. The Pacers win all of their 5 games. They will be 48-34 at the end of the season, and the Heat's best possible record, assuming the Pacers win out, would also be 48-34, but the Pacers would have the head-to-head tiebreaker, and there can't be any 3-way tie scenarios that the Pacers would not be ahead of the Heat. So the Pacers control their own destiny for the 6th seed. That is the top thing to know right now for the Pacers. That is possible. The other thing to know is the Knicks, maybe I'm wrong here. The Knicks are dropping bodies. OG Anunoby out. Julius Randle still out. They have lost 3 in a row. They lost by 1 at home to the Thunder. They lost in San Antonio. They lost to the Heat on Tuesday. They're not playing great, and their schedule is not hard or easy, I would say. They have Kings, Bucks, Celtics in their next 5. And then their other 2 games are both Bulls games. The Bulls are getting close to nothing to play for. They still would like to host the 9-10 game so that they still are playing for that. But the Knicks are 44-31. They only have 1 more win than the Pacers. So since we last talked, I think the important things to know are most stuff has kind of stayed status quo because, like I said, most of these teams are doing pretty similarly to what they were doing. But the Knicks are more attainable than I thought for the Pacers to catch in the standings. They still control their destiny for 6. And Embiid is back. And the Sixers are now extremely scary. So 2 standout things before we talk matchups. The Magic's schedule of being a joke is finally kind of over. They got a huge win tonight. They beat the Pelicans on the road. So that might have put the nail in the coffin of the Pacers potentially catching Orlando. They play Charlotte in their next game, which is funny. I just said their schedule's not a joke anymore. But then they close with Chicago, Houston, Milwaukee, Philly, Milwaukee. That's tough for them. If the Pacers play well, which they just lost and don't deserve the benefit of that doubt, they can catch the Magic. The Knicks close Sacramento, Chicago, Milwaukee, Chicago, Boston, Brooklyn, and Chicago again. Yes, they have 2 more games than the Pacers. I think they're also catchable, but the Pacers have to play well, right? I keep saying these teams are catchable. If the Pacers play well, they're not. They went 2-1 since you last heard me talk about all this stuff, right? And had a demoralizing loss along the way. So it's possible for them to move up. I think the Cavs are not totally out of the question, mostly because the Pacers play them and can clinch that head-to-head tiebreaker. But that one's tough. That Cleveland closes with Lakers, Clippers, Grizzlies, Pacers, Hornets. 2 freebies in there with the Grizzlies and Hornets, who have very little incentive to win anymore. If the Cavs get 2 freebies, they'll be at 48 wins, which is the Pacers' absolute peak. So that's probably out of the question. But either way, there's still a lot at stake here because of the schedules of the teams around the Pacers, even though they are in 7th as we speak right now. So the reason I want to talk about matchups is part of the biggest thing at play, I think, for the Pacers the rest of the season is avoiding the plan is priority 1, of course, but the biggest thing about not being in the play-in, if you're the Pacers, is you can't play Boston. If you get in the play-in, even if you win the second game and you're really psyched you get in the playoffs, right? You're the Pacers or the Magic, or I guess those are the 2 main ones. Probably the Cavs a little bit fall in this category too. A younger team in an early or first postseason berth in the current iteration, you are trying to learn about your team. You want to win every game. You want to win every series you're in. No fan is psyched to learn, right? But that is valuable information. If you play Boston in the first round and get smoked, no one will be disappointed in the result. Most people expect that. But you have less chances to see the team and see them adjust and see them learn and all that kind of stuff. Avoiding Boston is critical for every team, including teams trying to win. But for the Pacers specifically, even just playing a team that you can get to 6 or 7 games with, get more data points, is extremely valuable. The other thing is they've done well against like every East playoff team. I think there's only 2 teams that, if I'm the Pacers, would really put the fear in me in the first round. One's Orlando, who has just beat the doors off the Pacers twice in Indy this season. Their defense is just unbelievable. The Pacers did beat them and hold them to 97 points in Orlando. I think the Pacers can play well against the Magic, but just as a matchup, from a matchup perspective, that one's tough. The other one is New York. If New York is fully together and healthy, I think they're a really tough matchup for the Pacers. And in theory, the Pacers can end up playing a bunch of teams in the first round with how jumbled this all is. But I've thought about this a lot, is can you even try to game matchups if you're the Pacers, right? Do you want, like, is their best case scenario playing Cleveland, who they think they might, like, do they think they can beat Cleveland? Do they think they can beat Milwaukee because they went 5-1 against them? But the problem with that is if they think, oh, the best chance gets Milwaukee, well, Milwaukee's second. They have to be the 7th seed and go through the play-in to play the Bucks. It's precarious. So the reason matchups are important to me to kind of discuss is, one, you can't game it out. In some years, the standings break in such a way that it's possible to say, well, if we lose our last game, it doesn't matter. We'll actually fall to a seed that's better for us. We've seen teams do this with some success, like the Bucks the year they won the championship. We've seen teams do this to some level of failure. The Clippers are notorious for having done it with that Daniel Otoru game, but it's not possible for the Pacers to do it. Even if they wanted to play the Cavs or the Bucks instead of the Magic or Knicks, which might not even matter, it's going to be impossible to do. The standings are so tight. The margin of error is so thin that it's going to be hard. The Pacers do have a nice edge on the Sixers right now. They're ahead in the loss column by 1. They have 2 more wins. They have the tiebreaker, right? So really, they're 2.5 games ahead. The Sixers are fascinating because Joel Embiid is back. They are going to be exceptionally good the rest of the season. That does not make them easy to finish ahead of if you're the Pacers. The Sixers' remaining games are, they play the Heat tonight and then the Grizzlies easy and Spurs over the weekend. Here's the thing about that. It's a back-to-back. Which game they play Embiid in is going to be interesting. And then the Pistons, and then the Magic, and then the Nets. That is comically easy. Comically easy for the Sixers. Here's what I think is fascinating to think about them. They won that Thunder game clutch. Had they lost that, it would have been huge for the Pacers, because I kind of think the Pacers are rooting for the Heat tonight against the Sixers. Even though the Heat are their closest adversary directly, if they can knock the Sixers down one peg and give themselves more wiggle room to be 7th and host that first play-in game, I think that might be more valuable, and because they still play that Heat game on Sunday. It's tough to say, though. It's obviously very convoluted. I can hear the argument for both. That's one of the biggest games of the Pacers season. They're not even in it. they're not even involved. But what happens in Sixers Heat is going to matter a great deal to them. There's also a tiebreaker at stake in that game. And the Sixers winning could matter for the Pacers for 3-way tiebreaker scenarios involving the Heat and 76ers. So maybe in that way they're rooting for the Sixers and they can help themselves stay ahead of the Heat and play the Heat in the 7-8 game. I hear arguments for both, but I think with Embiid back, I mean, I don't know what you want if you're the Pacers. You want to get 6th and you control your own destiny and maybe you don't care at all, but that's a huge game for them tonight. One of them is going to suffer a loss, and then the Sixers might not lose the rest of the season. We'll see. We'll, of course, be tracking it all here. This is the last standings watch with any sort of theme or any sort of catch-up. We will probably now ditch this as a weekly segment, not because we're not going to talk about it anymore, but because we have to do it way more often. I think starting next week, this will be closer to daily or every other day because the dynamics change so much, and it gets to the point where, like, the Pacers want the Bulls to do well now. 1, because they play the Knicks so much, and 2, because if the Bulls do well, the Hawks may not want to try in the last game of the season when they play the Pacers. They might have nothing to play for, right? There's just a lot of snowballs that come from all these games when there's only a week or so left. And I'll try to do my best to keep you all informed here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. But, of course, the theme is Pacers are 6th if they just win. Thunder coming up, big game. If they win that, the guaranteed epic battle coming against the Heat on Sunday. Maybe no guests tomorrow. I have a lot of personal life stuff to do, so I'll try to think of 3 interesting things to talk about alone. And then I might do 2 weekend episodes, actually, because that Heat game is so important. So we'll see. Lots of fun stuff coming here on the Locked On Pacers podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed today's show, even though the game was not very fun. Back tomorrow talking more Pacers. Till then, everybody have a wonderful, wonderful day.